If a German recruiter gets this kind of CV, they will most likely not read it and reject it. In this video, we will talk about how to craft a killer CV that motivates the German recruiter to not only read it, but also invite you for interviews. And by the way, the strategies has nothing to do with creating an ATS-friendly CV. Hey, my name is Jen and I'm from Guatemala.
And mine is Yvonne and I'm German.
And together we're from simplegermany.com, where we create English content to empower internationals to settle into life in Germany more smoothly.
To give you some background, I have been a hiring manager in Germany for over 3 years in my previous role. And I have scanned, read, interviewed over hundreds of job applicants and rejected a bunch as well, of course.
I was just gonna say. And as another perspective, I, Jen, have found 4 different jobs in German companies by adapting my CV to German standards. And in Simple Germany, we have done thorough research throughout the years, which has been for the past 5 years, with both hiring managers, CTOs, recruiters, and other people finding jobs in Germany to find what are the strategies that are currently working to land a job in Germany in 2025.
To land an interview in Germany with your CV, it needs to excel at 2 things. Number 1, the format. If the format is not pleasing to my eye as the recruiter or hiring manager, I don't even read it because I'm not enticed. I feel like you didn't do your homework. You're not adapting to my standards, my cultural standards. So I'm not even intrigued, no matter how good the content or your experience might be.
And that is the perfect segue to talk about content, because content does matter. Once you have nailed the format and the person is enticed to read your CV more, of course, you need to deliver with good content on your CV of your experience to motivate and intrigue the person even more to want to invite you to an interview. So content does matter. If you adapt your CV to the format only and don't adapt the content, then of course, that's not going to work.
Yeah, we're going to jump into an example later on. So what does this actually mean? I will try to be as specific as possible. When I was a hiring manager, I followed these 3 steps. Number 1, I scanned the CV. So here I usually focused only on the format itself. If it is too crowded, like the examples here, I will reject immediately because it conveys that the person was not able to actually choose what is relevant for this job role and not. They try to just put everything that they've done in their life on there, and that is not relevant for my position. Number 2, if the format is clean and intriguing, then I actually proceed to read, scan over the words and read. I usually follow first the work experience, and there I scan a little bit the timeline and do the former positions match what I'm looking for. Then I look at the personal introduction and just look at the picture if I have one, look at the name, address, where they're living, whatever is relevant to my position that I've defined before. And then number 3, I might look at the education at the end. That for me is always not priority, but more a bonus.
I would say that also highly depends on the type of job that the person is applying to, because of course, if you're applying to be a super engineer for an aerospace company in Germany, then I think education matters a little bit more than in your case, you were looking for salespeople for a travel company, right?
Correct. And as a 3rd step, once I'm intrigued by the CV, I actually go ahead and read the cover letter because that reveals even more because it's usually a free text that people had to write. And I would like to see not a repetition of the CV, but something that adds to it, that complements to it, and see the motivation and the personal experience of the person, why they match not only the job role, but also the company culture. And if all of that is still intriguing, then I call them and invite them for an interview.
That is fantastic. I feel like we just went into the minds of the German hiring managers and how they process information. And throughout the years, we've also seen a lot of internationals struggle with the following. Everyone writes like, how can I make an ATS-friendly CV? And our reply is always, you don't, because in Germany, ATS, this software that you send an application and they automatically reject it, there's like this bot that scans it, doesn't exist per se. What can happen is that when you submit your application to a company, if it has a form that you need to fill out answer a few questions, and one of those questions you don't fulfill, then they might auto-reject you. As an example, in your previous company, one of the requirements was for the employees to speak English. So if the question was like, do you speak English? And the person replied, no, then the system would reject it. However, if you pass that first, let's say, questionnaire, which is based on requirements that the company have, then your CV will always land in an inbox for a human to scan. And I emphasize on scan because they're not reading. we talked to a recruiter who he showed us really the system, the ATS system, which is pretty much a glorified or a different kind of Kanban board that you have columns that says, this is the incoming CVs, which ones do you want to pass for an interview or send to a manager? And you can actually place the applicant in different stages. And he specifically emphasized, look, every time we get a CV, we all read it. And every company that I have worked for in Germany has worked the same. So there is no ATS friendly. You actually have to write to CV for humans, specifically in this case, most of the times Germans, to be able to read it and scan it and be enticed by your application.
So what does a successful German-style CV actually look like? It needs to follow a few parameters. Number one, I cannot emphasize enough, is a clean and empty space look and feel. It cannot be cramped. There needs to be spacing on the side. Also, often we follow 2 columns as in our CV template because it just gives the words room and I can scan it easier.
I have an example for this. For example, when you go to a bookstore and you want to buy a book, if you see this super interesting title of a book and then you open it and you see this super tiny font and everything is super cramped and you're like, oh my God, who has time to read this? Versus if you find a book that the title is enticing and you open it and the font is big enough and it just captivates you because it's so easy and fluid to read, I would say the same principle applies to this. The second thing it needs to contain is clear, identifiable sections, 6 to be precise. As you see in the CV here, we have personal information, a brief professional summary. This is optional. However, we have seen throughout the years that this has become more and more popular. And here it's important to limit it to maximum 2 paragraphs. Sometimes we see applicants that actually fill it with like 6 paragraphs and they want to say everything that they have done. And this is just too much. Again, keep it short and sweet. What is the most valuable skill and achievement that you're bringing to the company that you're applying to? And if you're a developer, you can actually add an extra line to put your tech stack up front. So from the very beginning, the person reading can understand which technology you're good at coding at. Because remember, the first person reading your CV is not necessarily the hiring manager. It could be a recruiter and they have a list of keywords. They are the ATS system that they need to look for. And if they can see this information up front, that is a fantastic win.
If you're not a developer, don't put your tech skills or your IT skills up there. They belong on the second page, which we will show later.
Then we follow by the work experience, and here also in chronological backwards order. So the most recent experience first, followed by education, and here also the same reverse chronological order, followed by additional skills and achievements if you have any. And here in the personal interest, I think it's also where I, in the past, have also made mistakes because I put like, I love movies and traveling. This is not relevant to the job that I'm applying for. However, in this example CV that I have enjoyed woodworking, and I believe woodworking is a fantastic hobby to sharpen my problem-solving skills. So then I do woodworking to sharpen or something in the lines of like to sharpen my problem-solving skills because it's relevant to the role of a software developer that I am applying to. But if you have hobbies that are not relevant, then it's best to leave them out. Then just add something that is so general that people are like, yeah, exactly.
As I mentioned earlier, a maximum of 2 pages is ideal unless you have 20 years of experience. But even then, one would need to ask if, let's say, the last or the first 5 years of your professional career still matter to the role you're currently applying for.
And in this case, I would say the role of the CV is to get you an interview. Of course, if the person reading your CV realizes that you as a professional should have way more years of experience, because that's what you say in your professional introduction, like I have 20 plus years of experience, and in the CV, I only see the past 10, in an interview is where you have the opportunity to provide even more context of the experience that you have and not the CV, because like you said, that experience could not be relevant anymore to the job that you're applying to.
And one last thing that is super important is do not put any fancy icons or graphics. We have this perfect example of one of our students from our German-style CV template who had this kind of CV beforehand, which didn't perform so well, let's just put it that way, and then transformed his CV into the German-style CV following our template, which, again, you can be the judge for yourself, looks very different, and that landed him literally 2 interviews in 2 applications he sent right off the bat, which previously he had been rejected towards. So he reapplied to the same job. So this is really the power of the format and the content on how you craft what you have to offer.
Another big question that we get asked is, should I put a photo on my CV, a picture? And the answer is, it depends.
To be honest, a traditional German-style CV always has a professional headshot. And like I mentioned earlier, I used to look at the pictures on my applications that I received. However, things are also changing slightly in Germany depending on the company and the company culture that you want to apply for. And when we look at job applications, we see, not all of them by far, but we see some of them that actually emphasize in the job description not to add a picture, a date of birth, and your marital status. So this is super crucial to read the job end until the very end, because sometimes it literally is the last line. So obviously, if you would to this job ad have a picture in your CV, that would be an auto reject, regardless of what your format and your content is, because you didn't read the job description. So here it's a little bit of first read what the company wants and then decide for yourself how you want to portray yourself. But if you do put a picture, it needs to be a clean, friendly, professional one.
Yes, and I would say some companies are cheeky like that they, in the job application, in very small or in the middle of other big text, they give specific instructions, and that is kind of like their test and their filter to see if one reads the application correctly and if one is able to follow instructions or just randomly sends everything, right?
And pays attention to detail, yeah.
Exactly.
Now, this was a lot of talk about the format because it is the very first hurdle you need to take. However, like Jen emphasized at the beginning, the second next hurdle is the actual content, the meat of your CV. So how do you craft that to impress, to then get the interview invitation?
To do that actually requires a lot of self-confidence because you need to shine with your expertise and the value that you can bring to the company. And I have to be honest, this is not always an easy exercise because sometimes we doubt if the things we've done in the past actually are transferable or if they're good enough to land a job. And this is where we say, yes, it is. And it is about how you market yourself and how you present that information to your future employer. Now, I'm not saying go ahead and lie and make something up that you never did, not at all, but actually to take the time and reflect, what things have you achieved in your previous roles with? I'm pretty sure you have achieved something, otherwise you
even as part of a team, right? It has to be your personal individual achievement.
Exactly. What things have you achieved in a team? And it could be, like you said, in conjunction with someone else in the past that you can actually portray to the new company that they would see valuable. And for this, the best way to do it is to actually use quantifiable bullet points. And quantifiable here is super important, as well as bullet points is super important because, again, we want to convey the information in an easy, scannable way. And to do this, we have a formula. Here we like to start with an action verb plus a quantified outcome plus using the words by, through, using, plus your actions. Now, what does that mean? Don't worry, we have a few examples prepared for you. I am a software developer by trade, so I prepared an example CV for our German-style CV toolkit that you can use as inspiration. And from that, I'm going to pull some bullet points that I can show you what I did to actually showcase what I have done in the past in a quantifiable bullet point manner. Example number 1 is I wrote, reduce page loading times by 80% and increase conversion rates by 15% by engineering a microservice architecture. So I believe, first of all, whoever reads this is able to understand what I did. I avoided using a lot of technical or very specific wording, like with what frameworks I did this and everything. I think the most technical aspect is the microservice architecture. And I didn't achieve this on my own. I was part of a team that we achieved this goal together. It wasn't just me as a developer. We were, I think, like 15 developers working on this project. However, I contributed, therefore it's also my achievement. And another example that is not necessarily so specifically quantifiable is the following. Initiated bi-weekly after-work events for developers to talk about new technologies, learnings, and failures. So I started an initiative in my previous company where bi-weekly, this is the quantifiable measure, we would meet as developers to talk about what I mentioned, our failures and our successes. I believe this bullet point transmits to the recruiter or the person reading this that I am a team player, I am open to learning and growing in a team, and I create initiatives that foster this kind of environment. So if the company values this very much, which a lot of companies do, then I believe this is a winner bullet point.
I was just going to say, the second bullet point Jen just read, I think is a perfect example to showcase your personality. And when we talk to recruiters, CTOs, hiring managers, and also for myself, I wasn't just looking for someone skilled in the field that I'm looking for, but also for the right culture fit. Because the recruiters always emphasized they didn't just want coders in this case that knew how to code and just sit pretty much like, in the movies, like the hoodie up and code all day. They wanted someone that matches the culture, that cares about the business just as much as about the code. And with a bullet like this, you can portray that. Now, I would like to give one more example for one of the bad CVs that we actually said before, and they were rejected right off the bat because of their format. However, when I did look a little bit deeper in preparation for this video, the content of the CV was quite strong with superb experience, beautiful quantified bullets. However, I never would have gotten to read them as a recruiter because the format alone would have led to rejection. And that again is the power of why both are so important. So here's the example. And this is from a marketing professional. Achieved a 56% increase in Instagram followers, a 76% increase in email subscribers, driving an 8% increase in ARPU in 2024. Now, I would like to dissect this in two parts. One, the quantifiers are super graspable by anyone. They're super strong. I mean, those kind of growth rates in followers, email subscribers, which are even more valuable, but especially the 8% increase in, and now comes a little criticism, ARPU. If I'm a recruiter, not a marketing specialist, I have no idea what this stands for. It stands for average revenue per unit. But again, the hiring manager might know this, not the recruiter. So I would stay away from any jargon, whether it's tech or niche specific. I mean, if you just write driving an 8% increase in revenue,
that's fantastic.
That's fantastic. Yes, it's not revenue per unit, but you want to bring the point across, right? So super strong bullet with a little bit too much jargon.
Now, we assume that you're here watching this video because you have a goal, and that goal is to get hired in Germany. We hope you have found the content of this video helpful, and we can tell you that the fastest way to achieve this goal is to purchase our German-style CV toolkit. It will give you the step-by-step instructions on how to fill out each section with tons of resources that you can use to get more interviews in Germany with as little guesswork and mistakes as possible. Our package includes the CV template that we have been referring to over and over again that is available in Google Docs, Microsoft Word, and Mac Pages. We have also prepared 2 real-life examples of CVs that you can use as inspiration while you fill out your CV.
Additionally, you got a list of over 200 action verbs. Remember, action verbs are to start the bullet points with, to emphasize what you achieve. And those 200 action verbs that we put together are organized by the type of role that you had. For example, whether you've led projects, whether you've analyzed data, whether you've improved processes, and many, many more. This alone takes away the guesswork on how to start and convey your value in your work experience section.
I would like to add that these action verbs were not created with ChatGPT because when you use AI to do such things, you will have the same verbs be repeated over and over and over again, to the extent actually that recruiters are able to pinpoint this was generated by AI.
In our interviews with them, they literally named like the top 5, and the moment they see them, they're just, another AI CV.
So these action verbs were created by humans without the use of AI, just to emphasize that.
And to top it all off, Jen and I have created 11 video tutorials focusing on each section individually of the CV, where we go into detail and actually craft Jen's example CV together on how to fill it out, what is our thinking process, how do we behave, and also think of the value that we provide. We just showcase how we think. I think that's the most valuable thing that you can learn, to then take that and analyze how you can translate your experience.
We prepared this toolkit to help you save months of frustration and rejections and increase your chances of landing an interview in Germany, which will eventually, hopefully, help you land a job in Germany. This toolkit has helped so many of our 1,000 students to actually get hired in Germany, so we're pretty confident it can also help you out. You can find the link to our German-style CV toolkit in the description box below. Until next time, cheers!